Hey, what's up everyone, this is MugenLord here, and today I want to talk about RPGs, but more specifically JRPGs. Now the reason why I wanted to bring up this topic is because there was an interesting article that happened recently from the director of Persona and Metaphor ReFantazio, where he thinks that the next generation of JRPGs will change the genre structure and presentation at a fundamental level. And he dubs this JRPG 3.0, which I find quite interesting is because I never thought about, the different grades or the evolution stages of the JRPG genre. Never thought about that. So if he's dubbing it 3.0, what is actually JRPG 1.0 and 2.0? Well, apparently in the article, he pretty much elaborates on that. He thinks that 1.0 is your true classics like Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy, in which Japanese developers themselves have built their foundations off of what Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy has established. So I'm thinking more along the lines, because he doesn't really give any other examples other than that. So in my personal opinion, I think games that's like JRPGs 1.0s are games that's found during the NES and SNES classics, where you had so many other developers building games off the foundation of Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy. We see games like, of course, Secret of Evermore, Secret of Mana. We have even the original Star Ocean series. We have also the Tales series, was it Tales of Fantasia, and many other games in that space. And it was a perfect example of what a JRPG 1.0 is. And it's kind of crazy is how players interact and the stories that they're able to tell, especially moving from NES to SNES, is that step up what developers are able to do with the technology that's available to them. And I also think about how we get these new releases of these HD 2D remakes made by Square Enix themselves. And I had the opportunity to be able to play games like Alive Alive. Alive Alive is a perfect example of a game, especially during the 16-bit era, which was a game that was never released here in the States. But if you look at that game and how players are able to interact with those type of games, where you're able to pick different characters from different perspectives, different stories, the themes, and how the developers tell these stories, and the awesome music score that it has, and how it all comes together, is a perfect example of what a JRPG 1.0 could possibly be. Now, what's quite interesting is he doesn't really go into any details about, what JRPG 2.0 are. But if he were to take an educated guess, and especially by the examples that he says of how JRPGs change its structures from a fundamental level and gameplay aspect, we can assume that going into the 32-bit era, we have that example of what a JRPG 2.0 is, and even moving forward up to this current generation. And that example in the 32-bit era would be Final Fantasy VII. Look at Final Fantasy VII and what it had offered with this brand new technology. Now you're able to use and create CGI cutscenes, something that was never ever thought about in the JRPG genre. And once they really push that forward with the storytelling, and as I said before, Final Fantasy VII is responsible for bringing the JRPG genre into the mainstream, and it became much more popular to what it is today due to the technology that was available, how the developers are able to tell the story of Final Fantasy VII and deliver that experience that became an unforgettable experience. And as I said before, you come here on this channel, you know how much I love Final Fantasy VII, you know how much I just love the JRPG genre in general, because of the worlds and the characters and how you play and interact with these games on a fundamental level. Just changed everything. And you look in the PS1 era, we had so many different forms of gameplay from various different companies, especially during that era. And that's your JRPG 2.0, which we're still currently in JRPG 2.0. And since we're looking at the director of Persona and Metaphor ReFantazio, Persona in Metaphor also fits in JRPG 2.0 and how they delivered that experience. Persona series, where you have that real life simulator, your day schedules, and how you bond in with your friends and with your party members and everything like that. So they offer with that. And then you look at the Trail series, especially with the more recent Trail series, how you have a cross between your turn-based and also action RPG experiences, which is quite interesting. Now, when he talks about 3.0, he also brings up how people talk about how turn-based should be something that should return, and how Expedition 33 was very well received, and how it sold over 5 million copies. And now people are wondering what's going to happen to JRPG, especially when it comes to Square Enix themselves. Will they bring back the turn-based gameplay mechanics that everyone is dying to have Final Fantasy return to, opposed to having the action? And what I find quite interesting is that during this interview, and you go farther into the article, you see Yoshida, the director of Final Fantasy 14 and the producer of 16, when they was asked in an interview whether or not the Final Fantasy games could go back to being turn-based, especially after the success of Expedition 33, and they pretty much said this, like, there's no guarantee that they'll go back to turn-based, but it's definitely something they would look into, but because they don't want to be like constrained to just turn-based. They want developers to be able to express themselves the way they want to express themselves, especially when it comes to JRPGs themselves. But Expedition 33 had pretty much set that interest, especially for a lot of players who are yearning for the return of turn-based in Final Fantasy series. Now, as far as in regards to JRPG 3.0, what could that possibly look like? And in my personal opinion, I think when it comes to JRPG 3.0, as Hashino said, is pretty much taking the fundamentals to a whole nother level in how we interact with these games. And to me, in my personal opinion, if we have an example of what 3.0 could possibly be, I think when it comes to 3.0, I think when it comes to JRPGs in this 3.0 phase, is how combat or how interactions with player in the game itself has evolved. I think, in my personal opinion, I think 3.0 should be a blend between turn-based and action, where the combat or the gameplay itself allow players to have choice in how they want to be able to get engaged or involved with the gameplay mechanics itself. And I think that we've seen examples of how Final Fantasy VII Remake, in my personal opinion, despite me disliking the story of the game, I do love the combat. The combat is addictive. They were able to mesh together both the action aspect of what most modern Final Fantasy games since Final Fantasy 15 has become, and then also blend it in with somewhat of like almost like turn-based with your action, battle gauge that you have, where you freeze time and you're able to pick your commands in which you want your party members to do, or whatever player control character that you have currently, to be able to perform specific actions. And if you want to essentially play it like a full-on action game, then you can map your special abilities on shortcuts so you can keep the action as seamless as possible. So you get in a bit of that strategic stop motion and plays the decisions that you're trying to make, while at the same time you get that high adrenaline rush of a typical action RPG. And I think that Final Fantasy VII Remake got that idea pretty nailed in, and only if Square Enix just take that a step farther moving forward with Final Fantasy, despite me liking turn-based, which I would love a new Final Fantasy turn-based, but if they were to just go with action, I think this was the recipe of how to actually create a hybrid between turn-based decision making and also action RPG combat. I think that's the perfect way to go, and all they have to do is just tweak it, modify it, and add to it with every new Final Fantasy entry. I think that's a great idea. And then of course we go back to Expedition 33. Even with that being turn-based, I think that's also pretty cool, is because they can also blend in those things where you're able to interact while playing turn-based with your parries, your counter systems, and everything like that. And I think that's how we get into JRPGs 3.0. And as I said before, when you look at Metaphor ReFantasia or the Trail series, you got that hybrid between action RPG just for a little bit, and then it pretty much converts over to a turn-based gameplay type of system. So that's what I think that what 3.0 is going to possibly be. We want to start having more player choice and how players choose how they want to interact with the gameplay itself, and I can't wait to see, you know, what the storytelling was going to be like and what more they can do to push the genre forward. It's been a long time since, you know, JRPGs is finally starting to come back even stronger than ever, since the West had pretty much dominated the RPG space, you know, in the past couple of generations. Yeah, and it's definitely good to see that they're really trying to step things up to a whole nother level, and it's just amazing to see that we've been in 2.0 for so long. So I'm looking forward to see what JRPG 3.0 is going to be. So this is where I ask you guys, do you think this is all nonsense, or do you think that, you know, we definitely want to see some type of evolution to JRPGs moving forward? And when do you think that JRPGs 3.0 is going to actually kick in? When are we going to see this evolution? When are we going to see this change? Are we going to see it next year or next generations of consoles? I definitely want to know. And what do you think 3.0 is going to be? What is your interpretation of what JRPGs 3.0 is? So if you like the video, hit the like button, subscribe button for more gaming content here on this channel. This is MugenLord signing off. I'll see you game fiends later. Peace out.